I now want to look at adding rational expressions. And for this, we're going to use the idea that a over c plus b over c is equal to a plus b over c. So if the denominators are the same, then I can just add the tops. What if the denominators are not the same? The first step is to factor all of the denominators. I'm then going to look at everything that's on the denominator and take the product of all of these factors raised to the highest power. So if I have something like an x minus 1 squared on a denominator, the least common denominator should also have an x minus 1 squared rather than just an x minus 1. And this is how I find my least common denominator. So let's look at some examples and see if we can figure out how this works. Here I have 5 over x plus 5 plus 2x over x plus 3. When I find my least common denominator, I start with the first fraction and I write down what's in the denominator, x plus 5. I then go to my second fraction. This denominator has an x plus 3. So my least common denominator is x plus 5, x plus 3. If I look at my first term, I have a 5 over x plus 5. To make the denominator look the way I want it to, I need to put an x plus 3 on the denominator. And if I add this thing to the denominator, I also need to put it in the numerator, so that it actually does cancel back to get where I started. For the second fraction, 2x over x plus 3, in order to make this denominator look like the least common denominator, I need to do an x plus 5. And if I put it on the bottom, I also need to put it on the top. Multiplying out that numerator, 5x plus 15 for the first fraction. And then I can just add the numerators. This is what my rule said now that the denominators are the same. 2x times x squared, or 2x times x is 2x squared, and 2x times 5 is 10x. All over x plus 3, x plus 5. Well, this can then be simplified. I have a 2x squared plus 15x plus 15. All divided by x plus 3, x plus 5. So now I have the solution. Here's my next example. My first step is to factor. So if I look at the first fraction, I have an x minus 4 on the top. The denominator, I need two things that multiply to be 6 and add to be 5. And I can get that with 2 and 3. My next piece, x plus 1 over. I need to factor x squared minus 4, and we can do that with x minus 2, x plus 2. When I write my least common denominator, I start with the first fraction. It has an x plus 2 and an x plus 3. I then move to the second fraction. It has an x minus 2, so I write that down. And it has an x plus 2, but I've already written x plus 2 down. I do not need to write it down again. So I have my least common denominator. When I look at my first fraction, I have x minus 4 over x plus 2, x plus 3. And the term I am missing to make this my least common denominator would be the x minus 2. And if I put an x minus 2 on the denominator, I also have to do it to the numerator. My second fraction has an x plus 1 on the top. The denominator has an x minus 2 and an x plus 2. And once again, I'm missing a term here, which in this case, I'm missing the x plus 3. So I'll put that on both the numerator and the denominator. As I multiply, the numerator becomes x squared minus 2x minus 4x plus 8. Since these have a common denominator, I can go ahead and add the numerators. This one gives me x squared plus 3x plus x plus 3 all over the denominator. X plus 2, x plus 3, x minus 2. I can then add. I have 2x squared terms. I have a minus 2x minus 4x, that gives me negative 6x. Plus 3x gives me negative 3x. Plus x gives me minus 2x. And then I have an 8 and a 3 to get 11. All over my denominator. X plus 2, x plus 3, x minus 2. Here's my next example. Just like before, the first step is to factor these denominators. Two things that multiply to be 2 are 1 and 2, and these also add to be 3. For the second one, I need numbers that multiply to be 3 and add to be 4, and that will be 1 and 3. So when I look for my least common denominator, I write down what's on the bottom of the first, x plus 1, x plus 2. I then look at my second fraction. It has an x plus 3 and an x plus 1, but I already wrote down x plus 1, so I don't need to write it down again. My first fraction has 2 of these terms in the denominator. It has an x plus 1 and an x plus 2. And then it is missing something that we need to attach to both the numerator and denominator, which is the x plus 3. The second one, currently the denominator has x plus 3, x plus 1. And it is also missing something to match the least common denominator. This one's missing an x plus 2. So I'll put that on both the numerator and denominator. I can then multiply. When I do, I get x squared plus 3x minus x minus 3. And my second fraction, now that they have a common denominator, I can add them. I get x squared plus 2x plus 5x plus 10. All over x plus 1, x plus 2, x plus 3. Now let's try to simplify this. Well, I have an x squared and an x squared, so I have a 2x squared. I have a 3x minus x, that gives me 2x. Plus 2x is 4x, plus 5x is 9x. Negative 3 plus 10 is 7. All over my denominator. X plus 1, x plus 2, x plus 3. And we can actually factor this numerator. This factors into 2x plus 7, x plus 1. All over x plus 1, x plus 2, x plus 3. And now I can see the x plus 1s on both the numerator and denominator. So I'm left with 2x plus 7 over x plus 2, x plus 3.